16, Malik Torrance wasn't looking for drama, he just wanted a smooth flight. His idea of the perfect trip was simple: board the plane, find his seat, put on his headphones, and zone out to his favorite playlist until landing. But from the moment he stepped into Sacramento International Airport that morning, something felt off. It wasn't dramatic, no loud confrontations or outbursts, but the weird glances and the uncomfortable silence around him were unmistakable. Despite it all, Malik kept his cool. His grandmother had always taught him to rise above, to be better than what people might expect. She had just recovered from knee surgery, and he'd spent a quiet week with her, helping with groceries and tending to her garden. It was a simple visit, but one that made his mom proud. Now, as he boarded his flight back to Atlanta, he had no idea that the short leg from Sacramento to Phoenix would stretch into something far more complicated than he ever imagined. Malik walked down the aisle, his boarding pass in hand, heading toward his seat, 14A. He'd chosen the window seat because he loved watching the takeoff. But when he reached the row, someone was already in his seat, a man with headphones on, half asleep. Malik double-checked his ticket and then turned to a flight attendant who was walking down the aisle. "Excuse me, ma'am," Malik said, his voice steady. "I think there's someone in my seat. I'm supposed to be in 14A. Without even looking at his ticket, the attendant snapped, "That's not your seat. You're supposed to be in the back." Malik blinked. "No, I was assigned 14A by the app. There was a switch at the gate." "You can check." She raised her voice, cutting him off. "Don't talk back. I don't care what some app says. Go sit where you're told." Passengers around them began to notice. Some raised eyebrows, others clutching their bags a little tighter. But no one said anything. Malik's heart started to pound, not from fear, but from the frustration and the sting of being dismissed. Why did it feel like he had to defend his right to be there? Calmly, he pulled out his phone and showed her the boarding pass on the app. "It says 14A, he said, trying to stay composed. She crossed her arms, stepping closer. "Are you refusing to comply with a crew member's instruction? Because that's a federal offense." And that's when something inside Malik shifted. It wasn't anger, it was resolve. Without hesitation, he reached into his backpack, pulled out his phone, and dialed his uncle. "I need you," Malik said as the call connected. The moment his uncle, Xavier Torrance, picked up, the entire tone of the flight changed. Xavier's voice was calm and direct. Malik barely had to explain. A few sentences and the basics were enough. The flight attendant shot Malik a sharp look. "Is that a phone call?" she demanded. Malik didn't flinch. "I'm speaking with my attorney." For a brief moment, the flight attendant hesitated, her expression shifting to one of doubt. "Who's your attorney?" she asked, as though trying to catch him in a lie. Xavier's voice came through loud and clear. "Xavier Torrance, Civil Rights Division. You might want to pause before you escalate this any further." The flight attendant didn't respond right away. She turned toward the front of the plane. "Captain, I need someone removed from 14A. This passenger is non-compliant." A murmur spread through the cabin, and passengers began to speak up. "Wait, he's not even in the seat yet," one man said. "This isn't right," another voice added. A woman across the aisle stood up. "I saw it. He asked calmly and she jumped on him," she said loudly. "Ma'am, please stay out of this," the attendant snapped, but the woman wasn't backing down. "Not this time," she replied. Malik, still holding the phone to his mouth, spoke quietly. "Uncle X, people are starting to talk. Someone's recording." "Good," Xavier said. "Tell them to keep recording." The situation was far from over, but Malik knew something had shifted, not just for him, but for everyone watching. The power of standing your ground, of having someone in your corner, was undeniable. Malik dialed his uncle's number, his voice steady as he relayed the flight details. "It's BAE 43112 to Phoenix," he said, his eyes never leaving the flight attendant. "Got it. Stay calm. Don't say anything else to her." "You've done enough," his uncle Xavier replied, his tone firm and reassuring. Meanwhile, Flight Attendant Delacroix was speaking into her walkie-talkie, eyes flicking between Malik and the front of the plane. Her voice had dropped to a low murmur, but Every few seconds, she glanced at him as if he were a ticking bomb she couldn't control. Still, Malik remained calm, standing there quietly, waiting. Not with anger, but with the quiet strength of someone simply asking to be treated like a human being. A male flight attendant, older with salt and pepper hair, stepped cautiously toward Malik. His name tag read G. Norrell. Unlike Delacroix, his demeanor wasn't aggressive. If anything, he looked a bit uncomfortable. "Son," he said quietly, "can I see your boarding pass?" Malik handed it to him without a word. Norrell scanned the ticket, then checked the screen on his device. His eyebrows shot up slightly, but he didn't say anything at first. "You're in the right seat," he finally said. "There was a reassignment at the gate." Delacroix, who had overheard, moved quickly. "That can't be right," she snapped. "It says 14A, but the manifest still has a different name." Norrell cut her off. "His name is there now. It was a last-minute change. It's in the system." A heavy silence filled the cabin. Malik didn't smile, didn't show satisfaction. He simply stepped to the side, sat down in 14A, and placed his phone in his lap. Delacroix marched toward the galley, but a few passengers leaned into the aisle to catch the moment. One of them whispered, "She's going to regret that." Malik's heart was still racing, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. He quickly texted his uncle. "They see it now." Xavier's response came almost immediately. "Good, let me handle the rest." Meanwhile, in his office in Oakland, Xavier Torrance was already on the move. Pacing with a Bluetooth headset in one ear, he had his laptop open, and his assistant Dominique was pulling up flight data, company contacts, and legal documents. Xavier was a man who didn't waste time. He never had. His reputation was built on years of making institutions flinch at the mere mention of his name. Civil rights wasn't just his job, it was personal. And this was about his 16-year-old nephew, targeted before takeoff. "Get me a direct contact at Blue Air's legal," Xavier instructed. "Skip the PR line." As Dominique dialed, Xavier's focus never wavered. Back on the plane, Malik sat quietly, fingers still clutching his phone. His stomach had calmed a bit, but his mind replayed the moment over and over. He wasn't angry, not yet, but he was tired and confused. Why did it always feel like people expected him to shrink in situations like this? The man sitting beside him, middle-aged with a faded baseball cap and arms crossed, shifted slightly and spoke without looking at Malik. "That woman's out of line," he muttered. "Came in hot for no reason. You were polite. I saw it." "Thanks," Malik said quietly. A few rows up, a young woman in a yellow hoodie stood up, speaking loudly enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "Hey, if anyone else saw what just happened, start saving your recordings. Don't delete them. The truth matters." Several phones went up and voices murmured in agreement. Up front, Delacroix was still on the intercom phone, her tone now lower, more unsure. "The pilot has been informed of a disruption," she said, repeating the words non-compliant passenger several times. But she was no longer in control of the narrative. The cabin had seen too much. Meanwhile, Xavier had Blue Air's legal department on the line. A junior counsel answered, sounding mildly disinterested. That is, until Xavier said his full name. "This is about a passenger on BAE 43112, currently taxiing out of Sacramento," Xavier stated. "My client, my nephew Malik Torrance, was just publicly confronted, misrepresented, and humiliated by one of your crew members, T. Delacroix. I have multiple witnesses, live recordings, and passenger confirmations. Your employee refused to verify his boarding information, attempted to relocate him without cause, and threatened federal charges." The line went quiet for a moment. "I'm not fully briefed on this," the attorney finally said. "No, you're not," Xavier replied coolly, "but you will be. Because if that plane takes off with her on it and no official intervention, your airline will be looking at a civil action before the landing gear even hits the ground." The silence stretched again. "I'll notify the captain," the lawyer said, his voice now clipped. "Please hold." Back on the plane, something was clearly happening. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been advised of an issue that requires attention before departure. We'll be returning to the gate shortly." Please remain seated." A ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin. Some passengers were surprised, others nodded knowingly. Malik leaned back in his seat, watching as the plane slowly pivoted away from the runway. Across the aisle, a flight attendant, this time not Delacroix, approached him. She was younger, brown-skinned, and visibly nervous. Malik sat quietly in his seat, processing everything that had just happened when the flight attendant knelt beside his row, her voice softening as she spoke. "I just want to say, I saw what happened, and I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened to you." Malik gave a small nod. "Thanks," he muttered. She hesitated before adding, "You handled it better than most adults would have." He didn't respond. He was still balancing between staying composed and wanting to cry, not out of weakness, but from being exhausted with moments like this. As the plane neared the gate, Xavier's call came through again. "She's being pulled," he said flatly. "They're not letting her fly. They know they messed up. Sit tight." Malik stayed calm, but the flight crew was now scrambling. What came next would turn this delay into a national story. As the plane rolled to a stop at the gate, the cabin lights brightened. No one moved yet, but the energy had shifted. You could feel it in the air, passengers whispering with more purpose now, the steady hum of curiosity turning into something sharper. The door opened, and 2 airport security agents stepped on board, followed by a Blue Air supervisor in a navy blazer. Her face was tight with urgency as her eyes scanned the rows before locking on Malik, then Delacroix. "Miss Delacroix," the supervisor said, her voice clipped. "We need to speak with you at the front of the cabin." Delacroix tried to keep her expression neutral, but her mouth twitched as she stood and followed them up the aisle. As she passed Malik's row, she didn't look at him, not once. "About time," the woman in the yellow hoodie muttered from behind Malik. Passengers watched in silence, some filming, others just observing, phones ready but not yet raised, waiting to see what happened next. 10 minutes later, the supervisor returned alone. She walked directly to Malik, kneeling so she wasn't standing over him. "Mr. Torrance," she began, "we sincerely apologize for what happened. I want you to know the flight attendant involved will not be continuing this trip." "You have done nothing wrong." Malik met her gaze. Why did it take a phone call to be heard? The question hung in the air. The supervisor swallowed before responding. Sometimes it takes one voice to wake everyone else up. Before she could say more, the captain stepped into the cabin and addressed the passengers over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're addressing a personnel issue and will be resuming boarding shortly. If you need to stretch, you may do so now, but please stay near your assigned seats." No one moved. Everyone wanted to see what was next. The man next to Malik leaned in once more. "You got guts, kid," he said. "I've seen grown men fold in situations like that." Malik didn't say anything back, but he appreciated the words. Then came the next twist. A flight attendant approached Malik again, this time with a seat reassignment slip. "Mr. Torrance," she said, her voice softer this time. "We'd like to move you to seat 2A for the remainder of the flight. First class." Malik blinked. "I'm fine here." "It's not a reward," she added quickly. "It's just quieter, and we thought you might want space." He looked at her, then at the empty first-class section visible through the curtain. Part of him wanted to stay in 14A to prove a point, but he also felt the weight of the stairs, the quiet assumptions pressing in. He stood up. "Sure." As he made his way forward, a few passengers in his section didn't just watch. Some nodded subtly, offering silent support. The woman in the yellow hoodie smiled at him, and a young man raised a fist at his chest. Not high, just enough. Malik took his seat in 2A and sat still, his backpack at his feet. From this position, he could see the whole plane. It looked smaller now, more manageable, but not any simpler. Back in Oakland, Xavier watched as the first viral post popped up on his screen, a video with over 15,000 views in 10 minutes. The caption read, "Teen boy wrongly accused on plane. This is what really happened." Xavier shook his head. "They're gonna feel this one." Dominique, his assistant, looked up from her desk. "Want me to send an official statement?" "Not yet," Xavier replied. "Let it simmer. As the plane prepared for takeoff again, the real storm wasn't behind them. It was just about to hit the public eye. What started as a trickle of posts from scattered passengers quickly turned into a flood within the hour. Videos, tweets, screenshots of the boarding pass app, all telling the same story from different angles. A teen wrongly accused, a flight attendant shouting, a quiet refusal to back down, and a phone call that flipped the narrative. In seat 2A, Malik didn't know how viral it had gotten yet. His phone buzzed nonstop, but he ignored it. Not out of pride, but because he didn't know what to say. The whole thing still didn't feel real. A flight attendant offered him water and he thanked her. She lingered for a moment, as if she wanted to say something more, but in the end, she just gave Malik a small nod and walked away. The flight finally took off, nearly 2 hours behind schedule. Meanwhile, in the terminal, more than a few people were watching their screens, witnessing the story unfold in real time, while Malik, the very subject of it, was 30,000 feet above them. By the time Malik landed in Phoenix, his phone had over 50 unread texts. His mom had called 5 times, and his older cousin sent him a screenshot of a local paper already picking up the story. Passengers' video sparks debate over airline racial bias. At the gate, a Blue Air representative, a woman in her 30s with a PR smile that barely held, was waiting for him. "Mr. Torrance," she said, as he stepped into the terminal, "we'd like to extend our sincerest apologies and offer you a complimentary voucher for future flights." Malik blinked, clearly unimpressed. "That's it?" She shifted slightly, still smiling. "We're also reviewing internal protocols." Malik let that hang in the air for a moment before asking, "Did you watch the video?" She paused, then nodded. "Yes." "And you're still standing here offering me a voucher like that fixes something?" The smile cracked just a little. "We're taking this very seriously, I assure you." Malik just nodded, not out of agreement, but because he was done giving people more than they gave him. Back in Oakland, Xavier was on a video call with a panel of legal colleagues and journalists. They had all seen the footage. Some were angry, some energized. One called it a teachable moment, but Xavier wasn't in the mood for packaging trauma. "This was a quiet kid flying home," he said. "You don't get a pat on the back for fixing a mistake you created." Another lawyer on the call asked, "Are you filing suit?" "Not yet," Xavier replied. "I want an admission, public, not buried in legalese." Meanwhile, in Phoenix, the terminal buzzed with activity. As Malik made his way to the connecting gate, he noticed people glancing at him. Not the usual looks travelers exchange, but different. Some were sympathetic, some curious, and a few nodded quietly, as if they understood. A man in his late 40s approached near a vending machine. "You Malik Torrance?" he asked. "Yeah," Malik answered. The man offered his hand. "I'm Ronald Burke. I work in education policy, saw your video. What you did on that plane, that mattered." Malik shook his hand, unsure of what to say. "You didn't yell, you didn't fold, you held your ground. That's bigger than you think." Ronell walked off before Malik could respond, leaving him with that thought. On the connecting flight to Atlanta, Malik sat by the window again, this time with no issues, no shouting, just the low hum of the engines and the occasional crackle of the captain's voice. He stared out at the clouds, his phone on airplane mode, finally letting himself breathe. He didn't feel like a hero, just tired, but somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. Not in the world, maybe, but in him. While Malik tried to slip back into normal life, the world outside was getting louder. By the time Malik landed in Atlanta, his name was everywhere. News alerts, talk shows, hashtags. His story had moved beyond travel blogs and local papers. National outlets picked it up, each one spinning the footage in their own way. Some called it a procedural failure, others went further, calling it what it was, racial bias in real time. His mom, Trina, met him at the airport. She didn't say anything at first, just hugged him long and hard right there by the baggage claim, cameras be damned. "You okay?" she finally asked. "I'm good," Malik answered. "Not great, but good." enough to keep going. They drove home in silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind where neither of them wanted to fill the space with words that wouldn't fix anything. When they pulled into the driveway, his mom cut the engine but didn't move. "Your uncle called," she said. "He said you handled it better than some lawyers he's worked with." Malik gave a faint smile. "He told me not to say anything after I called him, so I just didn't." Trina looked at him carefully. "That's not easy, being still when someone's coming for you like that." "I didn't want to give her a reason," Malik said. "No, baby," she replied, her voice soft. "You gave her a chance. She just showed everyone who she already was." Inside the house, Malik found his little sister had made him a welcome back sign out of construction paper. She didn't really understand what had happened, just that something was different. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from old friends, classmates, teachers, even a few people he hadn't talked to in years, suddenly reaching out like they'd always been close. He turned it off and set it face down. At school the next week, things felt strange. Everyone looked at him a second too long. Some gave him high fives. Others asked if he was that kid from the plane. One teacher awkwardly pulled him aside. "If you ever want to talk about what happened, my door's open," she said. But Malik didn't want to be a symbol. He didn't ask for that. Malik just wanted to sit down somewhere without anyone doubting that he belonged. Back in Oakland, Xavier declined every interview. He didn't need airtime. What he wanted was accountability. Blue Air released a statement, polished corporate language full of strategic phrasing. They called it a miscommunication, promised to review internal conduct protocols, and thanked Malik Torrance for his grace and cooperation. No apology, no name, no ownership. Xavier wrote a response himself and published it through a legal journal. What happened to my nephew was not a miscommunication. It was a clear reflection of who gets the benefit of the doubt and who doesn't. It was a reminder that too many young black boys are treated like threats before they even open their mouths. My nephew was calm, polite, and patient. That didn't protect him. What protected him was a phone call, and that should disturb every single person reading this. The piece went viral in less than 24 hours. Blue Air's stock dipped the next morning. Meanwhile, Malik tried to live his life normally, but people didn't let him. He was now the kid from the plane, whether he wanted to be or not. But still, something stuck with him, something he hadn't expected. The support. Not just from friends and family, but from strangers, people from other states, other kids his age, adults who saw their own stories in his silence. Letters arrived in the mail, handwritten ones. A woman in Pittsburgh wrote, "My son is only 12, and I pray he grows up with the same strength you showed." A retired teacher from Kansas wrote, "You didn't just speak up, you showed up. That matters." Malik didn't write back to all of them. He didn't know what to say yet, but he kept the letters in a box under his bed. While others were busy labeling him a hero, Malik was just beginning to figure out what it meant to carry a story that didn't feel like it was ever supposed to be his. A few weeks after the incident, life started moving again. Malik wasn't in the headlines anymore. News cycles moved on, the social media noise faded, but the story stayed with people, the ones who really saw it for what it was. At school, Malik had learned to walk through the hallways without reacting to whispers. He focused on his classes, kept showing up, kept doing the work. His GPA hadn't slipped, even though the pressure had nearly broken his focus more than once. What surprised him most were the quiet conversations. Not the performative ones, but the real ones. One day in history class, a kid he barely knew tapped him on the shoulder. After everyone else had left, the kid said, "I was on a flight last weekend. Guy behind me started yelling about his seat, and the flight attendant didn't say a word, just smiled and helped him." Malik didn't say anything. "I thought about you the whole time," the kid added. Another time, a janitor, Mr. Daniels, who'd worked at the school for years, caught Malik by the vending machines. "You made me proud, young man. Most people don't stay calm when the fire's right in their face." Malik looked up. "It didn't feel like calm. It felt like holding my breath." Mr. Daniels nodded. "Still counts." Malik started writing again. Nothing big, just in a notebook, journaling, getting thoughts out of his head so they wouldn't keep circling. Sometimes he wrote about that day, sometimes he didn't, but it helped. Xavier checked in every week. "You want to go public with this again?" he'd ask. "We can push for policy training, even settlements." But Malik kept saying no, at least for now. He didn't want to be used by people chasing clout. He didn't want to be packaged. He just wanted to live. Still, the weight of it didn't disappear. Being the kid who made the call came with something heavier than attention, expectation. People wanted him to speak, to lead, to carry, but he wasn't a movement. He was a teenager trying to graduate and maybe go to Howard like his uncle, and yet he couldn't ignore how things had changed. Not just for him, but for people who saw themselves in him. One night, sitting in his room, Malik opened a new blank document on his laptop and typed, "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay calm when someone wants you to break." He didn't post it, he just saved it for now. Because maybe the lesson wasn't about turning into a leader overnight. Maybe it was about recognizing what you carry, how you carry it, and knowing you're not alone. Maybe it was about having someone to call and being someone others can call when they need to. Maybe it was about speaking up, even when your voice shakes, and showing that silence can still carry power if it's laced with truth. People said Malik changed that day, but he hadn't. He just revealed something the world didn't expect to see. Not anger, not defiance, just quiet, steady clarity in the face of ignorance. And sometimes, that's enough to rattle the walls. If you've made it this far, thank you. Stories like Malik's happen more often than we know, but not everyone has someone like Xavier on the other end of the line. If this story meant something to you, share it. Talk about it. Ask yourself how you'd act if it happened in front of you. Because sometimes change starts with who decides to stand or sit in the right seat. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, don't forget to subscribe.